Gary, what's up with the Chickens? The Chickens are one of the longest running bands in town now.
Yeah, we've been playing at the Laurelthirst every Monday from 9 to 11 for almost 15 years.
Wow.
15, I think, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's some longevity.
Yeah. The previous one I did 11 years with Goodwin at the Portland Brewing Company, but I thought that was a long time, but 15's a long time.
Of all of your instruments, what do you consider one your primary instrument?
Well, I do in the sense that I have more technical facility with clarinet than with the other two I play, but clarinet is so much more difficult to do than either flute or saxophone that that's what it requires, because basically each octave is a different set of fingerings, because on a saxophone you push a button and it goes in an octave. In the clarinet you push the button, you kick the key, and it goes an octave in a fifth, which means that each octave is a separate set of fingerings. And if you're trying to get fluent in 12 keys and you got 3.5 octaves, that's 40 sets of fingerings on a clarinet, so it takes a long time.
Which do you prefer?
I really like my alto flute the best, which is this little devil here, which I basically can't keep my hands off on. That low, woody kind of sound is just so attractive to me that even when I'm watching a video, I find myself picking up the flute and playing along with the soundtrack. You know. But you were talking about the Chickens. I'm really happy with the Chickens, but what's going on is that the two guitar players are getting in such high demand, and the bass player is playing in like 7 bands also, so that our chances of having outside work other than our usual Monday night thing are really limited. John was on, John Dufeld, who plays John Sullivan custom archtop guitar, he was on Jay Leno a couple months ago, and as a result,
Black
Prairie is very busy, and they're recording this week, and in fact yesterday they spent the whole day in a studio working on a new album. So then Tracy Kim is playing in a band called Adam Zwig, which is a rock band that tours, and so he's gone some of the time, and this makes it difficult to keep the Kung Pao Chickens going, but every time we play I think we get better, so I'm still happy with it.
All right, well, let's get to the topic at hand, which is something that I've always been fascinated in. I've never really been able to understand how this works, how it goes from your head out your fingers and becomes music.
Okay, well, that's a good way to formulate it, because that's basically what happens. Well, there's lots of different ways to start. First of all, let me just say basically to inform people what not to do, because the classical method of learning how to play is counter improvisation, because you overlearn certain patterns, particularly scales and intervals, and you work on very accurate technique, which is time limited in the sense of the time signature being like a metronome. While anybody doing improvisational music is messing with the rhythm, the melody, and the harmony. Well, none of those things are okay in a classical world, and basically if you learn that way, and particularly if you learn to read music before you learn to play music, you have a great deal of difficulty ever learning to improvise. And that last part is important, because learning to read music before you play music is essentially equivalent to asking a child not to speak until he learns how to write and read, right? It's literally equivalent. And yet almost all music teachers start out by teaching kids that this note is for this finger and for this tone on whatever instrument you're doing. And that just doesn't work well if you ever want to get to be an improvisational musician. So I was lucky in the sense my father is a music teacher, and that's the way he taught. He was the head of a music department in a school system, so he had 26 teachers he supervised, and that's the way everybody did it. But when I was about in 8th grade, my vision failed so badly that when I was in the band class, I couldn't read music anyway. And so I would fiddle with my reed the first time they went through the thing, and then put the reed on and play it by ear. and I've been doing it ever since. And I have some kind of natural ability. I think all the improvisational musicians have what I would call high musical memory. That is, you can hear a song once and it basically imprints. I mean, certainly if I hear a song twice, I don't forget it. So that's not true for other things that you do ordinarily, and so that's just something you're born with. And I'm sure it has to do with a certain part of the brain structure that's larger or whatever. But in any case, when you hear things and then you can remember them really clearly, then that's the foundation later on when you develop technical skill for you to be able to play, because the musical memory is always in the background and you have that to refer to. And many players who don't have as many natural abilities of that, as soon as you get off the melody, they get distracted and they have problems and they make mistakes and so on. And if they do make a mistake, they can't get back to the continuity of the tune. So they tend to shy away from that because nobody likes to make mistakes on the stage. So those are the basic things. And then the real difficulty is the middle part, which is where you have to basically master technically the instrument. You can't begin to improvise until you have the skills so that the things that you think that you would like to try, your fingers are able to do. So it takes at least 10,000 hours of practice for any given instrument, to the point where you have enough technical skill to be able to think of playing something that you've never played before and just be able to execute it the first time. Mm-hmm. It takes some people that can do it in a few years. Art Pepper was playing in Stan Kenton's band when he was 17. Mm-hmm. Kenton found him and got him into band, and it took him 2 years to figure out that Art Pepper could read music, because he did the same thing I did. And eventually he got to the point where he recognized it, and he taught him how to read music in a couple of weeks. And of course he was an extraordinary guy, but nevertheless, all of the really successful and I think notorious jazz musicians didn't in fact read music, and those include, Django Reinhardt, Bix Beiderbecke, Errol Gardner, Chet Baker, and on and on. I think the best improvisational musicians are people who, even if they knew how to read, didn't. Like Art Pepper could read after he was 19, but he never did. He never read music after that. So what you have to be able to do is to hold the melodic, harmonic, and rhythmic structure in your mind, and then extrapolate from there and assume that your fingers will be able to do what your mind is creating inside. So I actually hear notes in my mind, and then the notes that I hear just come out in my fingers. That's what happens.
What is the brain function?
Well, that's an important point. The basic thing that you have to do is you have to be able to trust the unconscious aspects of it, because the technical skills that you have are not conscious any more than you're conscious of stepping on the brake when you come to a stop sign. It's the same thing. It's like the skill is so overlearned that you're not aware that you're moving your finger to make a note. It has to be an unconscious process. So if you start to improvise and then you start to think consciously about what you're going to do, you mess up. That's a crucial part of it. And the main thing for that to happen is that you have to have trust. You have to trust that your abilities are there, and that you can try things that you haven't done before, and they will be able to be executed. And I can remember, actually, it wasn't that long ago, maybe 10 years ago, when the first time when that happened, and I started playing things without any kind of conscious monitoring, and it shook me so much that after a couple of bars I froze and stopped playing right in the middle of the tune. It's disconcerting, because it's almost like something is speaking through you rather than you having the aegis. It's your own aegis that's generating the music. So the experience is kind of like you're a receiver of something from somewhere else, and it's coming through you, but you certainly can't monitor it intellectually. there's a number of reasons for that. One of them is the thing I talked about where you block. The other one is that it happens too fast. I mean, when I'm playing a complex solo on my clarinet, the movements that I'm taking take longer than your brain takes to send a message from your head to your fingers. It, in fact, takes more than 3 milliseconds, which is about as fast as a nerve transmission will take. And that's at the highest rate. So basically, you have to trust that the structures that you've built for years and years of playing and from trying different things will be able to generate a pattern and execute it without any conscious control. And if you don't think that, you can't do it. First of all, you have to believe that you can do it. That's number one. You have to have faith. You also have to have faith that the other musicians, when you do this, won't be distracted or won't do something which impedes your creativity.
Do we know what part of the brain controls this?
Well, we know a lot of it is what's called prefrontal stuff. It's the things that make decisions and guide behavior. But actually, I'm not sure. There hasn't been any research that I know of about that specifically with regard to musical creativity, because that part of the brain really probably isn't what's doing it. It's probably the other associative areas, the large parts of the brain that don't have specific functions, that aren't specifically visual or auditory. Those are called association areas. But you have to have a good prefrontal thing, because most of jazz musicians' activity is expressing their experience in terms of their emotional and their wisdom and knowledge of the world, whatever that is. And what you're trying to do is convey your experience, which is heavily emotionally laden, through sound. And you have to be able to assume that you can do it spontaneously. You don't think about bending a note when you come to a blues note in a tune. You just do it. And if you start thinking about it, you may execute that note and then miss the next one because you've gotten in the way. So actually, that's a really good question. I'm not sure, and I've been studying brain function my whole life basically. I'm not sure exactly how the process happens, and as far as I know, nobody really knows. I think eventually they will. It won't take that long now that we've got everything mapped out. They can now, do MRIs and find out exactly what areas light up and where the blood flow is, and so they'll figure it out.
So it's still magic, isn't it?
Yeah, basically that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
It feels like it's magic. And in some ways, it's kind of, it's similar to what I think of people describe as religious experiences.
Really?
Yeah, I really do. I don't know if you ever read any William James, but he wrote a book called The Varieties of Religious Experience. And there's the sense that there's of awe and wonder about the world and the complexity of it, and the realization that the ego sense that we control what we do is really not what's happening. I mean, when we think that we're in control, that's only true at very superficial levels. Most of what, in fact, we do is things that are unconscious, certainly, even in the Freudian sense. I mean, the people you're interested in and the things that you focus on and the things that you attend to are not conscious choices. They occur at unconscious levels.
So it will continue to remain a mystery, won't it?
Yeah, I don't think it'll ever be anything but a mystery. But the great fun of it is, well, that's I wanted to make sure that I pointed that out, is that I think the focus of music should not be on performance, but on the fun factor. If you get a kid and and he says, or his dad says, or somebody in the family says, you should play clarinet, and he puts the clarinet together and he plays a note, and it doesn't enthrall him, and he doesn't want to immediately play more notes, and instead he wants to put it down, then he probably shouldn't do it. And that doesn't mean that he doesn't have musical ability or interest. It may mean it's the wrong instrument. And kids should really choose their instruments. They shouldn't be imposed from the outside.
Well, thank you for clearing it up as far as it can be cleared up.
Yeah, I don't think there's any obvious way to talk about improvisational things. I do think that listening to complex fugal and so forth classical music is a really good base. My father, as I said, was a classical teacher, and we had music on from breakfast until bedtime every day. And so from the time I was in the womb, I was hearing Bach and Beethoven and Brahms and Schubert and Mozart and Schumann and so on. The whole raft of people. Well, particularly the things like Bach that involve counterpoint and fugal things that really help improvisation, because a lot of improvisation involves mirror images of patterns. So you're doing a pattern goes up and down on one instrument, and then if I play along with my clarinet while it's going up and down, on the flute I may go down and up. And then there's an interweaving of the patterns. And the interweaving is something that it would be difficult to even if you wrote it all out, it would be difficult to diagram, because it's very complex. And so, at least from my point of view, it's completely intuitive. It's like you just have to assume. One of the things I was talking to Andy about recently was that I think of it as letting my fingers play. It's kind of like children play with a ball or play with jacks or whatever. It's like when I'm playing my flute along to something that I recorded on the Kung Pao Chickens, which I do every week. I record it and then I play along with it. That's also very important to develop those kind of skills, is to play along with stuff all the time. And it doesn't matter really what it is, but anyway, when I'm doing that with I'm playing flute along to a clarinet solo or a saxophone solo, depending on what I'm listening to, it's like my fingers are just having fun. They're just like your cat going out and playing with other cats. It's like a fun activity. If it's really hard work, then it's probably not going to go very far, because there's plenty of frustrations in playing music, and if it's really hard to get better at what you do, most people get discouraged and quit. I don't know how many hundreds of people come up to the stage and say, well, I played clarinet in 8th grade to 9th grade and then I gave up.
Well, Gary, thanks a lot.
Okay.
Appreciate it. We'll see you at the Laurel Thursday.
All right.